With the world watching, Beijing hosted a spectacular opening ceremony inside the National Stadium on Friday. Chinese President Xi Jinping welcomed world leaders and athletes from 91 nations. The ceremony was held on the first day of spring, according to the Chinese calendar, a theme reflected in white and green fireworks. It included the traditional Parade of Nations, performances from 3,000 people, pyrotechnics, and the Olympic flame placed inside a giant snowflake. For more on the Winter Games, let's bring in our panel. Joining us from Shanghai is Joseph Gregory Mahoney. He's a professor of politics and international relations at East China Normal University. From New York, Mike Bako is a sports editor with DailyNational.com. From Hong Kong, Peter Cavallos is a journalist who's covered several Olympic Games, and Wang Dong is an anchor with CGTN Sports Scene in Beijing. Let's start right there with you, Wang Dong, and let's begin with this opening ceremony. Put on by Chinese filmmaker Zhang Yimou, and this is one thing he's great at. He did it in 2008. I was at the G20 in Hangzhou in 2016. He put on this magnificent show there. This is sort of his wheelhouse. He's kind of a Chinese treasure. People are calling it dazzling. I want to get your impressions.
I guess, we are very, very happy that he did this job. And of course, when we heard his interview later on, he himself was extremely elated. He basically was saying that he delivered his message, and also with all these 2 years of relentless efforts, he really sent a message out by saying that togetherness is everything. Even before the slogan or the new motto of the Olympics actually was coming to China, coming to the world, and he felt that this whole theme was not about any individual person or individual country. It's really about the togetherness around the world to be shared. That's why he blended in a lot of elements, if you will, in that sense, especially towards the end when he came to the climax of the cauldron lighting. He said, to have two perhaps lesser known athletes there to light the cauldron makes a lot of actually meanings there to let people know that this lighting moment is shared, once again, was shared by the whole world. That's why he felt that he has already completed his mission in that sense in the opening ceremony. Of course, now he's ready for the opening or the closing ceremony later on.
Yeah, he still has work to do, no doubt about it. Peter, let me ask you about that lighting of the cauldron, because it was really interesting. Kind of a generational theme. Athletes, each generation, dating back to 1950. Talk to us about this. This also gets into the theme, not just of togetherness, but the history of this magnificent event.
Well, it was a nice theme where you got to see a bunch of athletes all from different years. I think it just shows, and it's part of what China's talking about, is they want to get 300 million people active in winter sports. So the best way to do that is to be unified or to include everyone. So if you do it from each generation, and obviously it culminates with the lighting of the cauldron, I thought it was a really smart way to do it. And 300 million people to try and get active in winter sports, it's a hard thing to do, but if you see it and you can include people, I think that was a smart way to do it.
And Mike, that is kind of a large hill that China's had to climb. It's not known for winter sports, and yet it's trying to build enthusiasm. It's trying to get people out there to take in these winter sports, and that's the hope that following the games, that they'll really kind of gin up this enthusiasm. Give me your take on this.
It's a real big snowy hill that they're trying to climb. They're trying to create this infrastructure and this interest in sports that traditionally were not of interest or even played by Chinese athletes, or even at a recreational level. We've talked about before about just all these efforts that have gone into creating this new winter sports culture. 300 million potential participants. They're talking about 80 to 90 hockey rinks being built, ski jumps being built, some of the ski lifts that are popping up all over the place, speed skating arenas. So this is an infrastructure that's being built not only for the games in terms of the professional environments, but all of these recreational environments that are being built all around the country in the hopes that once these Olympic Games pass, and it's been this big 7-year buildup to get these games off the ground, that it then becomes a generational change in terms of bringing interest to winter sports in China, not only growing it from a participation standpoint, but there's a lot of money involved in terms of growing this as a sport.
And Joseph, we're talking about climbing that snowy hill, as Mike describes it. There's another hurdle that China's had to deal with, of course, which is COVID. And as a result, no tourists allowed. and they're trying to keep it, they've had this kind of approach where when they have an outbreak, they have lockdowns, tracing, testing, inoculations. Obviously, COVID a major concern here. We've already had some athletes arrive, and they may not be able to participate in the games because they've got the virus. Talk to us about how this is being perceived as China continues this effort to try and really strangle the virus and not allow it to spread.
Well, there really are two sides here. The first is the zero COVID policy, which we see so much negative press about internationally. But having been in the United States for most of the outbreak and now being in Shanghai, I can observe firsthand that the zero COVID policies here are incredibly popular. They're strongly supported by Chinese people, and that's why they're working. And indeed, one of the key reasons why the government is so adamant about it. And I think that we have to understand that, Beijing looked at what happened last year in Japan, saw the public perception that there was some spread from the games associated with the games held there, and there are a lot of people in China who can tend towards a certain type of isolationism and xenophobia, especially when it comes to things like spreading disease. So I think that Beijing was walking a very fine line here. They wanted to reassure their own people that this would be a safe games for China, but likewise to reassure the athletes that they would have a safe environment, that they would maximize their own health security. Some people will arrive with the virus and there will be consequences for that, but some of them won't, and they won't be infected when they get here. And I think that that's what everyone should be focused on, as opposed to any of the sort of negative consequences that might be related to some people being excluded from the games.
And Peter, they've created this bubble system. They're calling it a closed loop. Kind of describe what it's like to be an athlete at these games versus another, because I know you've covered other Olympic games. It's quite different, isn't it?
Yeah, well, okay, so the Olympics I covered, first of all, I had a little knowledge of the city. So my first Olympics were Beijing. I just moved to Beijing, so I had some understanding. Vancouver was my hometown. I knew exactly where to go. And then Sochi, everything was so close together. It would be like, I guess, for someone, like all the venues were like within Central Park outside of the snow events. But here, everything, you could go wherever you want to. That's the big thing. Here, obviously in Beijing, you can't do anything. Talking to some of my friends that are covering it, it's very precise. You can go here, you can go here, that's it. You can't do anything. I've also heard stories about people, even if there's like an accident and you see like one of the Olympic vehicles on one of the routes, don't approach it because they're in this closed loop. They don't want to infect anyone. So if you see an accident, say involving one of the Olympic vehicles, you've got to call, and obviously the authorities will come, someone within that closed loop. Obviously that's the world we live in now. You can't, and they want to make every effort to ensure that no COVID is spread within it or anyone from outside comes in. I couldn't even imagine how difficult it could be to cover something like that where things happen in the Olympics. A world record is broken, so you've got to go and try to find, oh, hey, can we talk to this person? Suddenly, you're probably forced to like, no, you can't speak to them because you're put into this area. You're just covering hockey or speed skating or whatever. And let's say there was a world record in curling or whatever. Obviously there's not, but do you know what I mean? Like, so that's another thing they've got to sort of figure out how to do and how to get